Hi everyone, I'm Heather Wen, a retired nurse practitioner and the founder and practitioner at Arizona Healing Alternatives. On this channel, you'll find several videos, what I like to call aha moments, where we'll be discussing issues that impact your health. So whether you decide to use Western medicine, alternative medicine, or even a mix of both, I'm passionate about you knowing what your options are. On today's aha moment, we're going to be discussing the more serious issue of addictions. What's the definition of an addiction? And what types of addictions are there? And what can you do about it? So stay tuned. So let's start with the definition of addiction. And so if we look at Webster's definition of addiction, it is a compulsive, chronic, physiological, or psychological need for a habit-forming substance, behavior, or activity having harmful physical, psychological, or social effects and typically causing well-defined symptoms such as anxiety, irritability, tremors, or nausea upon withdrawal or abstinence, the state of being addicted. So if we look at the definition of that word, I want to break it down into some different categories. And the first category I want to look at is what mentioned the physiological or physical symptoms of addiction. What that means is it doesn't matter what you're doing or whether it's a substance or things like that. If you stop doing that and then physiologically or physically the body starts responding and has different things like agitation, anger, other things like that, that is the body's physically addicted. Well, what can cause a physical addiction versus a psychological addiction? Well, a physical addiction there can be predispositions to certain, like genetically linked, like in families. Sometimes alcoholism, you've heard, probably runs in families. It means that genetically speaking, that person's particular body, when it's exposed to a certain substance, can change receptor sites in the brain and things like that and make them more likely to get a physical addiction or physiological addiction to it. So that's the first category. The second is psychological, where emotionally you feel like you need something and you have to have something in order to feel better. Okay, so those are the two categories when it comes to that. Well, other things about that, let's look at what are different types of addictions, because some you probably wouldn't even think are addictions. But let's think about it. I mean, obviously the most obvious ones are like a substance, like alcohol, like any kind of drug. Now, what's interesting about the drug of THC or pot, which is now being used, or marijuana, is now being used for medicinal purposes. That's okay. But what happens is, many times we know there's not a physical or physiological addiction to it, but oftentimes there's a psychological one where somebody feels like, well, I'm not as creative unless I smoke pot. I'm not as, I need to relax. I need it to relax. That can be similar to the psychology of, oh, I need this food, or I need alcohol just to relax when I get home from work. That's the psychological or the mental aspects of addiction. And so that can be, like I said, a substance, and food includes a substance, whether it's food, whether it's alcohol, whether it's a drug, like an illicit drug, like heroin or things like that. But also nicotine, smoking is one of the most addictive things, which is more addictive actually than shooting heroin, I believe. And with that can physiologically change those receptor sites and make you physically addicted to that. That's that aspect of it. Well, there can also be other things like addicted to even emotions, addicted to anger, addicted to always being angry, or always having chaos, or always having something in your life that if you don't have that, you don't get the adrenaline hit off that, that's physical, even though it's also psychological. If you don't get that out of it, then you just need to create and get more and more and more and more and more, just like jumping out of airplanes. Well, that's positive, as long as you're willing to take that risk. That's positive. But with the psychological stuff, it's so important that you get some help with all these things, because also there is sexual addiction, there's gambling, there's all sorts of different addictions. The one that I want to focus on though too is, what about, I gotta look at my phone, I gotta text, I gotta get on social media. There are people that I have seen in my practice where they come in and they're so addicted to being on their phone all the time that it's impacting their family relationships, impacting those that they love around them. That's another type of addiction. Or even with teenagers needing to get on social media to get praise and get, and get likes, and they don't feel good about themselves unless they do that. Well, what's fascinating about all those things, and even social media and these devices that we have, is that they actually are capable of changing brain chemistry. They're actually capable, because brains, in another video I talked about, brains love pleasure. They love the dopamine hit. And so many times there are video games and there are other games and things like that, or just social media stuff, that end up changing brain chemistry sometimes, that it's got to have the pleasure. It's got to do it. It's got to do it. And if you don't have it, then you can get agitated. And that's the way you know if you really have a problem. I mean, besides the big definition that I just read to you guys, what it comes down to is if you put something down and you have to have it, what's going on there? If you could live without your phone the rest of your life, because the phone is supposed to be a convenience. It's not supposed to be you have to be in touch with it, have to be in touch with it, have to be in touch with it. If that's happening, it's so important that you get help. Please get help, because it can impact. And that to me is the biggest definition. If what you're doing is either is detrimental to your health, or is detrimental to others around you, and then you just can't stop doing it, whether it's psychological or physical, it's really, really important to get the help you need. And I could put up websites, but it depends on what the substance is or what the problem is to know what you need, because there's lots of different categories, including sexual addiction, you name it. Lots of different things, lots of help out there for this, but it's so important that you get that help. Because when it comes right down to it, how do you stop something? Because there are people who are actually functional alcoholics, let's say, that say, well, it's okay, Heather, I can put it down because I don't have to drink, until the weekend, or it's, a month or two. One of the things that was so important about what Viktor Frankl taught was intention as to why you're doing what you're doing. If you have to have something, that's when it's an issue. If you can say to yourself, well, I don't have to have alcohol the rest of my life. I have alcohol because occasionally it's enjoyable, I want to do it, not a problem. But if all of a sudden you have to have it, or you have to have, marijuana because it calms you down, if you have to have a substance, and that includes food, my friends. And one of his best stories was about food and about how it processes in your body. That if you are putting in your body something because you think you're solving a problem, and that's food to solve that problem, you're not solving the problem. It processes differently than if you're just eating it. Let's say you're just eating ice cream because you feel like eating ice cream, not because you have to have it or because it has to calm you down or it makes you feel better. Because if you're thinking that way, it's setting off those pleasure symptoms. So how do we treat this? How does it come down? Well, like I said, there are many things that you can do. There's all sorts of different things like acupuncture, herbs, other things like that can truly help with addictions. And what I do in my practice is several times, if somebody has that much of an issue where they really have to go to a facility, let's say it's alcohol, because there are some substances, folks, that you cannot get off of just cold turkey without it causing some serious conditions. And if it's that serious with alcohol, if you try to do it on your own, you can get what are called the DTs, or delirium tremens, and that can lead to seizures, and that can be deadly. So sometimes you have to physiologically or physically get some help. So please do that. And then oftentimes, whatever that emotion is that somebody is trying to avoid and replace with that addiction, that's something that I work on in emotional reprogramming or hypnosis or other things like that can help that person. It can be dealt with not only in what I do, but in regular psychological counseling, other places like that, to deal with the root cause of what is going on with this. So that is very important to do. And then it's oftentimes replacement, right? Especially with smoking. Sometimes people quit smoking and then they're consuming more food. Okay, that's not the healthy one. For me, it's an addiction to exercise. I love to exercise. If I don't get to, I get changes and I get irritable because I'm secreting my own endorphins or my own painkillers when I exercise. So that is a healthy addiction. But everything's in balance, just like the yin and the yang. It's not pronounced yang, it's pronounced yang. Just like that, the yin and yang means balance. So if I had to exercise every single day for 5 hours a day, What is it preventing me from doing? That's the other thing with social media and stuff. What is it preventing you from communicating with other people or having relationships? If I'm exercising 5 hours a day, I don't have time to do much of anything else. But if I'm doing that and then I'm wearing out, my knees and my joints and everything like that because I'm over exercising, that's an addiction too. That's a problem, right? So when it comes down to any of these things, that's kind of what I do in my practice, but it's about, is your replacement healthy? Just like, oh, I traded off the alcohol for water. That's healthy, okay? But too much water can be a problem too, depending on somebody's condition. But please, get help so you can get past any of these addictions, because what we want to do is have a nice balance in our life and make sure that we're healthy and happy instead of needing a substance or needing something on that regard. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to leave comments in the comments section. I'll be happy to answer them.